US has urged Uganda not to enact some of Africa's most stringent anti-LGBT legislation, which threatens sexual minorities with long jail sentences. White House officials warned of possible economic repercussions. The law is yet to be enacted, but back in 2014, the US imposed sanctions for passing a law which punished gay people with life in jail. It's not clear what this new law involves, but some reports suggest that some people could face the death penalty. White House spokesman John Kirby said if the law passed, any repercussions would be financial. The US invests almost $1 billion annually in Uganda through 13 government agencies.
The bill is one of the most extreme anti-LGBTQI+ laws in the world. Human rights are universal. No one should be attacked, imprisoned, or killed simply because of who they are or whom they love.
This is the Parliament passing it. It still has some process to go here. We're certainly watching this real closely, and we would have to take a look at whether or not there might be repercussions that we would have to take, perhaps in an economic way, should this law actually get passed and enacted. That would be really unfortunate, because so much of the economic assistance that we provide Uganda is health assistance, and largely through PEPFAR. You can see a world in which, a law like this, should it be enacted, would not only, as Karine rightly said, just be devastating to a whole community of people inside Uganda, but if it were to have any kind of an effect on our economic assistance, that would only make that worse. So we'll have to take a look. No decisions.
Well, Arise's East Africa correspondent Mark Bichachi has been monitoring both these stories, and he joins us live now from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Great to see you again, Mark. Let's start with that story that we just heard from Uganda about an anti-gay bill, which has now blown into a row with the US, with the Americans saying there could be repercussions if the bill is signed into law. What's been the reaction to all that in the region?
Well, it's actually a quite interesting story, because number one, we must remember that Uganda is one of those countries that the American right wing has invested a lot of money, not only in terms of illegalizing the LGBTQ community, but also in terms of ensuring that abortion and rights for women are not codified into law in Uganda. So for me, and for the region, this is quite interesting, because it seems like the United States has one side that is castigating this law and one side towards the rights of the American conservatives, who are excited and indeed are the co-sponsors of this particular bill in the Ugandan parliament. So for the region, this is something that is being observed carefully, because this is something that for many African regions, the issue has been don't see, don't ask, don't tell. But now, as it comes to the fore, there have been a lot of conversations about whether Africa and Kenya and Uganda and the East Africa community should remain as in the middle in this matter, so that it's neither liberal nor right. But at this point in time, it is looking as if, and I can tell you the conversation is heating up in the region, as if the Americans are pushing their own agenda down the throats of Africans.
Very interesting indeed. But let's stay in the region, Mark, and turn to Ethiopia. The peace process there appearing to be moving forward, with first of all the Ethiopian parliament removing the TPLF from a terror list, and now the TPLF spokesman being appointed the head of the Tigrayan interim government. I suppose the question is whether the Tigrayan people will accept him as a leader, because I understand the first choice of the TPLF was rejected by the Ethiopian government.
Well, it is indeed good news for the Tigrayan People's Army to be recognized and not as a terror organization anymore. This is welcome news, both to the Tigrayan people, but also for the peace process in Ethiopia, which was signed about 4 months ago. Now, it must be clear that this organization was first listed as a terror organization way back in 2012. So you can imagine this is 10 years plus of history being undone. Now, as to whether the Tigrayan people will accept the spokesman, it is an interesting choice. The spokesman is trusted by the central Ethiopian government. The Tigrayan people are not exactly averse to him, but they're also in a situation where they feel like they need to come up with some sort of compromise with the government of the day. Remember, the Tigrayan forces and the Tigrayan people have suffered quite a bit of loss in the previous war that was just concluded in the peace process. So I do not think the Tigrayan people will want to die on this hill of who is in particular as being recognized as their leader, but rather the recognition of the Tigrayan government, the Tigrayan people, and how they can move forward. I think that will be the bigger question for them.
And Mark, this is of course just an interim government, isn't it? I mean, which will be, I understand, in position until regional elections are set. But no one seems to know when those regional elections will take place.
Well, as you know, this is a war-torn area. This is a place that has suffered a lot of casualties, both in terms of infrastructure and in terms of people actually losing life and limb. So it could be a while, but according to the peace process, it should not take too long. So we expect that within 5 years or so, this should happen. But the saving grace is that this is not the entire Tigrayan country. It is the country of Ethiopia. So it is expected under the guidance and leadership of Chief Mediator Uhuru Kenyatta, we can see there, that the peace process will continue and those elections will be held sooner rather than later, because the stability of that Tigrayan area does not only affect the Tigrayans and the country of Ethiopia, it also affects Djibouti and Eritrea, which are neighbors, which, if you remember, were also partially involved in this particular conflict. So it is in the interest of the region that this peace process actually be activated as quickly as possible.
And I mean, Mark, after a 2-year civil war in which tens of thousands of people died and which sparked a major humanitarian crisis, does the peace plan appear to be steadying the ship?
Yes, indeed. The reports I'm getting out of Ethiopia is a more stable Ethiopia, a more optimistic Ethiopia. And this can also be underscored by the fact that both the president and prime minister of Ethiopia seem quite confident. They seem to be well positioned to guide Ethiopia into the future. There are no telltale signs of disquiet. But also let's remember that the central government sits at a stronger position, having received the support of diverse countries and nations and governments across the world that supported them. So the Tigrayans, the bigger question is not really whether this peace would hold, is whether the Tigrayans will feel satisfied with how things turned out. And I think what Prime Minister Abiy is trying to do is extend an olive branch instead of totally annihilating the Tigrayan forces, as it were.
Mark Bichachi is Arise East Africa correspondent. Good to talk with you, Mark, and he was talking to me there from Kenya.